My name is Sarah Jenkins. I'm 32 years old, and I'm a forensic accountant. The crisp November air bit at my cheeks as I walked up the familiar flagstone path, a heavy folder clutched in my gloved hand. The scent of roasted turkey and sage stuffing, usually a comforting embrace, felt like a taunt. Through the bay window, I could see the soft glow of the dining room, the heirloom china gleaming, my family already gathered around the table. My mother, elegant even in her apron, was just setting down the gravy boat. My sister, Jessica, was laughing, her hand resting on her fiancé Mark's arm. They looked like the perfect picture, a Norman Rockwell painting come to life, completely unaware of the storm I was about to unleash. I took a deep breath, the cold air burning my lungs, and pressed the doorbell. The chimes echoed faintly from inside. A moment later, the door swung open. My mother stood there, her smile freezing midair as her eyes landed on me. Her mouth opened, then closed, a silent gasp. My father appeared behind her, his usually jovial face hardening into a mask of disbelief, then anger. Jessica's head snapped up from the dining room, her bright eyes widening. Mark, however, just slowly turned, a faint, unsettling smirk playing on his lips. They had explicitly banned me from Thanksgiving, a direct order delivered with icy finality just 3 days prior. But I knew I had to be here, because what I'd uncovered about Mark wasn't just concerning, it was catastrophic. And by the time dessert was served, their perfect holiday facade would be shattered, and they would understand why my arrival, despite the ban, was the only thing that could save them. To understand why I risked everything to crash that dinner, you need to know about Mark. He'd swept into our lives 6 months ago, a whirlwind of charm and ambition. Jessica, 2 years my senior and always a little too trusting, was instantly smitten. Mark was tall, with an easy smile and a way of making everyone feel like the most interesting person in the room. He spoke of grand ventures, innovative tech startups, and a future filled with luxury. My parents, who had always doted on Jessica, were equally enchanted. My mother, Eleanor, loved his stories of philanthropic endeavors, while my father, Robert, a retired engineer, admired his supposed business acumen. They bought into his narrative completely, eager to see their eldest daughter settle down with such a catch. I, on the other hand, was wary. My job as a forensic accountant had trained me to look beyond the surface, to spot inconsistencies in narratives, especially when money was involved. Mark's stories, while impressive, often felt a little too polished, a little too vague on specifics. He'd talk about disrupting the market or synergizing opportunities without ever detailing what product or service he actually provided. When I gently probed, asking about his company's financials or his previous ventures, he'd laugh it off, saying I was too serious or that a creative mind like his didn't get bogged down in details. Jessica would quickly jump to his defense, accusing me of being cynical. My parents would nod along, chiding me for not being more supportive of Jessica's happiness. The first real red flag popped up about 3 months after Mark entered the picture. He'd announced his engagement to Jessica with a diamond ring that looked suspiciously large. Later that week, during Sunday dinner, he mentioned needing a small bridge loan for his next big project. He said his personal funds were tied up in a venture capital round that was just about to close. My parents, beaming at him, immediately offered. My mother showed me a text from Mark later that evening, asking for $25,000, promising to pay it back with interest in a month. He'd even attached a casual, handwritten IOU. I felt a cold knot tighten in my stomach. A legitimate businessman, especially one with venture capital backing, wouldn't be asking his future in-laws for a personal loan via text, let alone with a handwritten IOU. That detail mattered later. I decided to do some digging. Nothing illegal, just public records. I started with his name, Mark Harrison, and the names of the companies he'd casually mentioned. My forensic accounting skills kicked in, turning a casual search into a focused investigation. I checked state business registries, LinkedIn profiles, and local news archives. What I found was a pattern of dissolved LLCs, vague consulting firms with no online presence, and a surprising number of small claims court filings against him for unpaid debts in other states. There was a particularly troubling article from a regional newspaper about a failed tech incubator that left several small investors high and dry, Mark Harrison listed as one of the key players. The article didn't accuse him of fraud, but it painted a picture of someone who consistently overpromised and underdelivered, leaving others to pick up the pieces. I compiled my findings into a concise, fact-based report, printing out screenshots of public records and articles. I wanted to present it calmly, logically, to my parents and Jessica. I invited them to my apartment for coffee the following Saturday. I laid out the documents on my kitchen table, explaining each piece of evidence. Mom, Dad, Jessica, I'm worried about Mark. His business history is concerning. These companies are either dissolved or have no verifiable operations. And these small claims, they're from people he owed money to. Jessica's face crumpled. Sarah, stop. You're just trying to ruin this for me. You've always been jealous of me, haven't you? My mother's eyes narrowed. Jessica's right, Sarah. You're always looking for the worst in people. Mark is a good man. He's just had some bad luck, like any entrepreneur. My father, usually more measured, slammed his hand on the table. This is completely out of line. You're upsetting your sister. Mark is going to be family. We trust him. He picked up my carefully compiled report and tossed it back onto the table, scattering the pages. We don't want to hear another word about this. You are banned from Thanksgiving if you can't show respect for your sister's choice and her fiancé. Do you understand? I understood. I gathered my papers, my hands trembling. The ban was clear, unequivocal. For Mark. For Jessica's happiness. But the more they dismissed me, the more I felt a terrible certainty that I was right. This wasn't just about bad luck. This was a pattern. And their blind trust was a vulnerability Mark was expertly exploiting. Over the next few weeks, I couldn't shake the feeling that something bigger was at play. The $25,000 loan was still outstanding, and Mark had started talking about a prenuptial agreement with Jessica, which he said was just a formality for a businessman like him. He'd also mentioned to my mother that he was looking into consolidating assets before the wedding, suggesting my parents might want to restructure some of their investments for tax purposes. This set off alarm bells. My parents weren't wealthy, but they had a comfortable retirement nest egg. The idea of Mark getting involved in their finances, especially after what I'd found, was terrifying. I reached out to a former colleague, David, who was now a private investigator specializing in financial fraud. I explained the situation, careful not to reveal any privileged information, only what was public or what my parents had openly shared. David confirmed my worst fears. He found a recent public notice of a pending lawsuit against a Mark Harrison in a different state, involving a real estate deal that went sour, leaving an elderly couple facing foreclosure. The details were eerily similar to the failed tech incubator story. The man had a history of preying on trusting individuals, leveraging their goodwill and often their assets before disappearing. David also found a record of Mark Harrison recently changing his name from Marcus Hayes just 2 years prior. Marcus Hayes had an even more checkered past, including a felony conviction for grand larceny related to a confidence scheme. That was when the numbers stopped looking accidental. This wasn't just a charming opportunist, this was a seasoned con artist. And he was about to marry my sister and potentially drain my parents' retirement. The Thanksgiving ban, far from deterring me, only amplified my resolve. I knew Mark would be there, basking in my family's adoration. I also knew that Thanksgiving, with everyone gathered, would be his perfect stage for whatever his next move was. I had to be there to stop him. I spent the day before Thanksgiving meticulously organizing my new findings. The police report details, the name change documents, the lawsuit filings, the articles about Marcus Hayes, all neatly arranged in a new, thicker folder. I also included printouts of the $25,000 IOU text and the messages where Mark had suggested my parents restructure their investments. I even found a publicly available photo of Marcus Hayes from an old mugshot. It was undeniably Mark. This wasn't just a warning, this was an intervention. I knew it would devastate Jessica, and it would break my parents' hearts to realize they'd been so thoroughly duped. But the alternative, watching them lose everything, was unthinkable. When my mother opened the door, her face a mask of shock, I didn't hesitate. I stepped past her into the warm, turkey-scented hallway, my gaze sweeping the familiar space. My father, standing stiffly behind her, finally found his voice. "Sarah. What are you doing here?" "I told you." "I know what you told me, Dad," I interrupted, my voice calm but firm, but I couldn't let this happen. I walked directly into the dining room, my eyes locking onto Mark. He had risen from his seat, a flicker of something unreadable in his eyes, surprise, perhaps, but also a flash of calculation. "Jessica, look." Ed utterly bewildered. "Mark Harrison," I said, my voice cutting through the stunned silence, or should I say, Marcus Hayes? The color drained from his face. The smirk vanished, replaced by a cold, hard stare. My parents gasped. Jessica stared from me to Mark, her face pale. "What are you talking about, Sarah?" Jessica whispered, her voice trembling. I held up the folder. "I'm talking about the man who is about to marry you, Jessica. The man who is systematically defrauding Mom and Dad. The man with a felony conviction for grand larceny and a history of preying on trusting families." I walked to the head of the table, placing the folder down with a soft thud. "This isn't about my jealousy, Mom and Dad. This is about protecting you from a con artist." Mark took a step forward, his charming facade completely gone. "This is insane, Sarah. You're crazy. You're making things up." "Am I?" I opened the folder to the first page, a large printout of the mugshot. "Is this you, Mark? Or should I say, Marcus Hayes, from your arrest in Arizona 5 years ago?" I turned the folder so everyone could see. My parents recoiled. Jessica let out a small cry, her hand flying to her mouth. "And here," I continued, flipping to the next page, "are the public records of your dissolved companies, the lawsuits for unpaid debts, and the news articles detailing your previous scams. Including the one where an elderly couple lost their home." I looked directly at my parents. "He's not just had bad luck. He's a professional fraudster." My father, his face ashen, stumbled back against the wall. My mother covered her mouth with both hands, tears welling in her eyes. Jessica, her face blotchy red, stared at Mark, then back at the documents. "Mark, tell them it's not true." Mark, seeing his carefully constructed world crumbling, finally snapped. He lunged for the folder, but I was quicker, pulling it away. "Don't touch these, Mark. They're evidence." "You crazy bitch," he hissed, his voice low and venomous, a stark contrast to the charming fiancé they knew. "You'll regret this." My father, though shaken, found his footing. "Get out," he said, his voice surprisingly steady, pointing a trembling finger at Mark. "Get out of my house." Mark hesitated, then glared at me one last time. He grabbed his coat from the hall stand, his eyes burning with fury, and stormed out, slamming the front door behind him. The silence that followed was deafening, broken only by my mother's soft sobs and Jessica's heartbroken sniffles. The Thanksgiving dinner was, as predicted, ruined. The turkey sat untouched, the festive atmosphere shattered. My parents, after the initial shock and anger, slowly started to process the truth as I calmly walked them through the documents. My mother kept repeating, "How could we have been so blind?" My father, ashamed and furious, called the police to report the outstanding $25,000 loan, providing them with the IOU and my evidence. Jessica was devastated, locking herself in her room for hours. It was a painful, ugly truth, but it was out. Over the next few weeks, the fallout was immense. Jessica broke off the engagement, though it took time for her to fully accept the betrayal. My parents worked with the police, who confirmed Mark Harrison was indeed Marcus Hayes and had an active warrant in another state. The $25,000 loan was likely gone, but they were spared from his attempts to restructure their investments, which would have been far more damaging. My relationship with my family was irrevocably changed. The immediate anger at my defiance had given way to a profound, if unspoken, gratitude. They still struggled with the embarrassment and the pain, but they acknowledged I had saved them. The heirloom serving platter, usually laden with my mother's famous cranberry sauce, sat empty on the sideboard that Thanksgiving. It was a symbol of the perfect family facade that had been shattered, revealing the rot beneath. It took many months for the platter to hold food again, for laughter to return to the dining room. But when it did, it was a laughter that felt more real, more honest. The quiet, uncomfortable truth was that sometimes, the only way to heal a family is to break it first.